I want to be strong, to have the flexibility and confidence to play soccer with my kids or volleyball on the beach. I want to feel energetic and spontaneous with my husband. I want my body to feel the freedom to move and enjoy life, to hike Yosemite, surf in Hawaii, bike to the beach, to have fun with friends and not be limited. I want to do things that love my body, to feel and experience all the sensations of life. I want my body to be a force in nature that overcomes difficulty and resistance. I believe in health and wellness and daily consistent exercise. I'm here today with Nicholas Smith. He's a certified orthopedic clinical specialist, strength and conditioning specialist, and recently a Movement Links certified clinician. His mission is to evaluate and treat movement dysfunction for optimization of human performance. And today we are going to talk about how to build muscle. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to become a physical therapist.
So the beginning of my career as a physical therapist began with me being on the other side of the table. I was injured quite a bit in high school and got the experience of kind of being the patient and thought this would be like a really cool way to stay in touch with athletes, because not realizing that as a patient, I had 90-year-old grandma next to me, my very closed-minded view of PT. And I thought that would be a fun way for me to kind of stay interacted with people, but also do something that I like. Mm-hmm. And realizing that I was a very mediocre athlete in high school, I didn't think I was going to be going on doing anything after that. So, and then obviously as I got into the journey further into undergrad and started working as a physical therapist aide, I, kind of realized there's more to this field than just athletes. There, a lot of people need help. And another big influence was my grandmother had multiple sclerosis, and getting to see how she was taken care of. And there's just a large need for people, whether it's in physical therapy or, occupational therapy. I just figured it was a good way where I could, help other people.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about watching your grandmother with MS.
So, from when I was born, I never got to see her walk. She'd always been wheelchair bound and, very dependent, totally dependent. Feeding, dressing, transfers, all that stuff. And, her caretaker that took care of her as long as I can live and most of my, my mom's life, she was really good about taking care of her. And I just, it just kind of made me think that there's ways to do things in life that are really selfish, and there's ways to kind of like be helpful. And I've always kind of been the type of person, I don't know if it's subconscious or me trying to, but I genuinely enjoy trying to help others. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I just thinking about it and reflecting now, being a PT, I realized how much that had an influence on me.
Yeah, for sure, to watch her, I'm sure. And then your injuries, what brought that about?
Growing up as a little kid, I raced I raced professional in PT school, but I raced as an amateur BMX racer. So smacked my head a couple times, lots of scrapes, lots of bruises, scared my mom a fair amount of times. And then as I transitioned into high school sports, I had, run-of-the-mill injuries from shoulder to knee to thumb, wrist, things that weren't super serious, but enough to do PT and
you
get back on the court.
What physical therapists did
yes.
at a pretty young age.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And it was, at the time I was like, whoa, I always came back. I was able to play my sport, and it was pretty quick. And, kids are resilient. They're like Wolverine, and they regenerate, and they just pop back up and keep going.
That's really cool.
So I got to see it from that aspect of things, which was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. That's neat. So recently you did the residency. So for our listeners,
Yes.
To become a physical therapist, you get a doctorate in physical therapy.
Yes.
And then Nick chose to do Kaiser residency,
Mm-hmm.
and also to become a movement fellow, which is a year after PT school.
Mm-hmm.
And then he recently did the Movement Links program at APU.
Yes.
I would love to know just what those few years taught you.
Okay, so for the listeners who don't know the process of this, in order to treat, you need to get your license. So you go through the school, you get your diploma, and then you take your boards in order for you to be a licensed physical therapist so you can treat people. And then beyond that, you can take a program that helps you kind of specialize in a specific niche. So I decided to go along the orthopedic route. So orthopedics meaning I work with anything that's musculoskeletal, your run-of-the-mill wear and tear injury, a post-surgery, whether it's a total knee replacement, a meniscus tear, a rotator cuff tear, or if it's just general low back pain. And I wanted to pursue something to have a little bit of structure. Also, for the listeners who don't know, Beth was actually my clinical instructor in PT school. And working with her as a student and seeing the other people at our clinic, it was kind of I saw that there was a lot more out there than what just school was to offer. And I knew that I was going to have to pursue something maybe a little bit more to kind of be at that level. And so once I saw the standard, I was like, okay, this is, there's more to this, and there's a lot more that I need to learn. And so I decided to complete that. As a result, I was able to sit for my, there's a board certified orthopedic clinical specialist exam that you can sit for. It's not required. It's just, it looks good and it adds to your cool business card, I suppose. But, and then beyond that, I decided to pursue a fellowship program. I took a year off in between because I felt like I needed some time to kind of recuperate. It's a very grueling first year coming out of school, trying to learn how to balance a schedule, and then on top of that, having weekend classes, working 40 to 50 hours a week, assignments. So after I had some time to kind of digest that first year, I decided to go on further into the movement specialist fellowship through Azusa Pacific. And the reason I decided to go through that was seeing that there's more out there. We can, as PTs, you see the run-of-the-mill injuries that kind of come in, and they came to be reoccurring, but there was always a handful that were a little bit more challenging. They require you a little bit more thinking, and I wanted to know how to give that extra special time and attention to really help those who really need it. A lot of people do get better with time, and as long as they have a structured program, they do improve. But sometimes there's those ones that just need a little extra, and I wanted to be able to help them as best as I could. Ultimately, it was just to help my patients better.
That's great. That's really good. So a little bit more about you, and then I want to talk about how to build muscle, which is why most people have tuned in today. But just tell us a little bit about your hobbies. What do you enjoy?
Anything that is sports related, I'm really into. Young age, played all the different types of sports, from bike racing to football, basketball, baseball, volleyball. During PT school, actually, I got into competitive powerlifting. And then as of recently, my new hobby is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
really cool.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of jiu-jitsu right out of high school as an undergrad, and then shortly stopped just because of money and time. And recently I've had a second kind of flame to start it back up, and it's actually been one of the most fun things I've done in a while. So as far as hobbies, I love sports. I'm also the biggest nerd ever. So anything comic book related, superheroes, Star Wars, for me to turn my brain off and enjoy things like that, that is very much fun for me.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So movies, books, whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to move into content. So, I think what women want is some muscle.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about
making muscles.
How do we do that? And also, how do we do that as we age? So let's just start with, why is it good to build muscle?
Okay. So for anybody who's experienced any kind of exercise, if they've actually been rehabbing an injury, the thing that's often promoted is building some kind of muscle. Whether you partake in an activity, there's a certain amount of muscle and strength that is required as kind of like a prerequisite, if you will, to be able to perform that. So for those who are just looking for overall wellness, muscle is important for being able to perform our everyday activities, whether it's doing laundry, being able to do yard work, anything that we're able to sustain, life, being able to get in and out of our couch, get out of the car, go for a fun little hike with the family, walk the dogs, whatever that may be. Muscle can be the thing that allows you that freedom to be able to perform those exercises that you want.
Yeah, very good. What happens to muscles as we age?
So unfortunately, as we age, muscle does tend to dwindle. Dwindle.
Okay.
So the scientific word for that, they call it atrophy. So muscles do indeed get smaller with aging. The firing and quickness that we had, when we're younger, that tends to slow down. Our ability to grow muscle is not as efficient as it once was due to hormone changes. But not all bad. The one thing that we can preserve is our strength. So despite the size of our muscles getting smaller, we can preserve a lot of our strength going into our older years, which is very, very helpful. As a clinician, as a coach, I really try to promote that. And there are videos out there on YouTube of, men and women in their 60s, 70s, 80s powerlifting and still lifting tons of weight.
Incredible.
And they're very strong. And so maybe not necessarily what you deem as the bodybuilder, super ripped and tons of muscle, but that strength can still be there. Mm-hmm. So there is some hope.
There is some hope. So how can we prevent the aging issue?
So the best way to, in simple terms, is just never really stop. Do something, whether it's you have a routine throughout your week, whether it's a routine walk, you can walk your dogs, or you're on the third story at your work and you're going to take the stairs every day. It's just trying not to limit your activity as best as possible, because as we tend to get more tired, we have more activities, we're juggling families, we're juggling work, and we tend to let those things take over, and our health tends to kind of get tucked away because we're getting along, but we may not be thriving.
Right.
So I think the best thing is just to never really stop. Find something that you really love to do and keep doing that. Find some way to stay moving. It doesn't need to be this grandiose 3-hour exercise workout. It can be 15, 20 minutes a day scattered into 5-minute blocks throughout your day that's at your convenience.
Mm-hmm. So for women, there's different aspects about muscles, and different women want different things.
Of course.
Thinking about building strength is one. Thinking about building, some tone is another one. Thinking also, for me, I really do enjoy playing sports with my kids.
Yes.
So I want some power, some quickness, some speed, some agility.
Pizzazz.
Yes, I do want some of that. So just thinking about exercise programs and maybe being let's talk a little bit more specifically.
Yeah.
So say, for example, a woman I actually have a few women who are doing my program right now that want to be able to jump, and they didn't realize that they can't jump anymore.
Yes.
Okay. Can you just kind of explain why that happens? And then is it possible to get it back?
Okay. So as part of strength training or building muscle, there is kind of a process or continuum that you have to start with. So you have some baseline strength that you are required. If we're talking about jumping in particular, there are certain muscles that are required to produce a certain amount of strength. So for jumping, that is a squat with more speed. So when you start adding, like you said, the power or the pizzazz, that is a squat with additional speed to that. So you can train your muscles, like for a squat. You can train, your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves to be able to perform a squat. And then when it comes to the jumping component, you kind of tailor your workouts to where you're adding some kind of speed. So say you're squatting down to your chair, and when you come back up from the chair, you want to do it as fast as possible. And there's obviously some technique that's involved, being able to coordinate those muscles too, which is what comes with the training. And when you don't train your muscles to coordinate in that pattern, your brain tends to say, well, that's not important anymore. And you're like, well, wait a second. I remember how to jump rope. I could jump rope as a kid, and then all of a sudden they can't do that anymore. And also the other thing is there's a certain level of strength and muscle that is required to propel the body in the air. So there is, you kind of have to start with a base layer of strength before you can start getting into a power.
Right. Almost like training for a sport, right?
Exactly.
You have to have like baseline strength before you think you're going to, throw a baseball really fast or whatever.
Yes.
So say, for example, because actually this has been a question that people have asked me, and I would love for you to describe it.
Okay.
But why that happens. I mean, so there could be some muscle weakness in a certain area that maybe a woman wouldn't know. What would you do? So she comes in to the clinic. She says, I want to be able to jump. I can't jump. What might you do as a physical therapist?
So as a physical therapist, I would run her through some, a basic, what I would call like a movement exam or a structured exam. And there are certain components of a jump that are required. So just like with running, there are some prerequisite tests. So for example, I would want to look at their squat. I would also want to look at their calf strength. I want to see if they can, get up on their toes, because that is the end position before taking flight. I want to look at hip strength. I want to look at core strength, and I would run through some different tests. Definitely the squat, and I would also want to see what their landing mechanics are like. So I may not necessarily watch them jump, but I want to see, like, if they were to drop all of a sudden, I want to see if their muscles are capable of slowing down.
Right.
Because that's the other part. It's not just the producing power, but also being able to control that power as the landing. So there is a certain level of strength for different phases of the movement, which is what we have to, as PTs, as coaches, we have to be able to see that and see where the strength is lacking. Is it the being able to produce power, or is it being able to control that power?
Yeah, that's good. And also then range of motion.
Of course.
Maybe it's possible that...
It's can you even get into that position at all?
Right. So maybe ankles are stiff, hips might be stiff,
very
all
much
that
so.
stuff. But
so there's a lot of things that we can go through. If we do need to regress back or peel it back even just to the basic, can you even get into this position, and understand like the reason why you can't necessarily jump is because your joints, your muscles aren't able to physically get there first. So we may need to address, your range of motion or your flexibility to be able to get there before you even get into the strength and power component of it.
Well, it's fascinating. I think, I'm in my mid-40s, and, you do kind of remember. I mean, when I was in high school, I could, play volleyball. We hear this a lot from our patients. It's like, when did that happen? In your mind, you think, you're young, so I'm a little older, so I can say that, I in my mind, I feel like I can block. I feel like I could hit a volleyball. In my brain, I can see myself doing these, digging a ball.
Yep.
My body's just not moving that fast anymore.
Yeah.
And until you literally go out and play volleyball or try to do something, which a lot of people actually get hurt because they think in their brain, oh my gosh, I can remember and I just can't. All that to say is it is a good idea if you are wanting to, run again, jump again. It is a good idea to go see a physical therapist and have just some of these things looked at so that you could maybe go out and play volleyball with your kids and not get hurt. That's the ultimate idea.
I think that's oftentimes what we see, and I'm sure you can speak to this more than I can. A lot of the times people get injured is because they decided to take up either a new activity or retake up an activity at a very quick rate. Like, hey, I decided to go run a 5K today. I haven't ran in 10 years. Like, you know?
Yeah. Running is awesome.
There's nothing wrong with doing the movement.
So good for you.
Yes.
Just not from couch to 5K.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm super encouraging of those people who want to do that, but they also need, you know, maybe I'm hoping that more people, you know, listening to this podcast are able to see like, hey, maybe if I want to start a new activity, the way that I can keep this going for longer than the 2 months, or, you know, heaven forbid they get injured, you know, they can go see a PT or go see a, you know, someone has a good set of eyes that can monitor their movement and kind of get them on a nice program. Like, hey, you know what? I don't think this is outside of the realms of possibility, but I think these are some things that we may need to set in order to get to that. We may need to start here and work on this and kind of reevaluate our goals. Yeah. So that way you can do your activity that you really like. You know, if it's volleyball, you know, you may not be able to lay out for every ball that's, you know, 5 feet away from you, but, you know, if it's reasonable and you can get it, and that way you can keep doing your activities that you love.
Yeah. Let's talk about training and goals and how important it is. I know for myself, and I'm sure you can attest to it too, how important it is to have a goal that you really feel confident that you could meet, how important it is to you. Like, I'm training for a marathon right now, and that goal literally is waking me up to get my shoes on, to get me out the door. Yep. How important is that in training?
I think in not just training, but I think in life, goals are probably one of the most important things that you can do. It's just to set a goal and to properly set a goal, being able to, you know, write something out, like having it on paper, like from your brain and putting it out in the atmosphere, like that means something. It's personal. Like if you want to be able to achieve this goal, you're like, I want to be able to run a 5K, or in your case, like I want to be able to run a marathon. And then really have to think about like what is required of me to be able to do that. That's the long-term goal. But the short-term goal is I need to be able to run 5 miles. I need to be able to run 10 miles. I need to be doing my range of motion and my flexibility work. I need to be doing my strength work on the side. You know, there are certain little goals that kind of spider web off of that big main one. And I think that goals as a coach, as an athlete, being able to set those goals is super important. I would say that's probably one of the most important things as far as when we do an interview with a patient or a client. It's like, what are your goals and expectations? Because when they say that, it has personal meaning to them. They tell they basically get to direct the therapy. It's like, I need to be able to pick up my grandchild. I need to be able to, take my dogs for a walk. Like, what's important to them? So I think that goals are probably one of the most important things you can do or to set as an athlete or a coach or whatever it may be.
What if you have a goal that you feel like people around you are telling you that's not important, or that's not good, or you can't do that, or, what do you do when you feel like people around you are saying, I can say people have said, I don't think a marathon's healthy.
Yeah.
I think, maybe you played hockey in high school and, you're in your mid 40s now and people are saying, that's not safe. That's not, but you love it. Yeah. How do you help guide someone through that process?
I think, it's easier for you and I, because we can kind of see we know what's required. You've worked with enough people, and, I can't say that I've ran a marathon before, but I know that there's a certain level of, cardiovascular endurance and strength that's required to do that. So if somebody sets me that goal, and sometimes I'm not going to shoot it down, but I'll let them know, like, these are the things that are going to be required of you in order to achieve this goal. Is that worth it to you?
Right.
And you give it to them straight up. And I'm like, I'm not going to shoot you down, because that's not for me. That's not for me to make that decision. But I'll let them know very upfront, like, these are the things that are going to be required of you. And it's like, if you're saying this is the goal, I will do my best to try to help you, guide you towards that goal. But this is
the level of training required is really high, right? And the higher the level of activity, the more training.
Of course.
You look at those Olympians.
Yeah.
Incredible.
The highest level athletes, if you what's deemed, what you said, healthy. It's like anything, I always say, this is something I always tell my patients, everything in moderation, including moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're training for something like a marathon or an Olympic caliber athlete, that's not moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Your life is dedicated to that. You
Mm-hmm.
eat, breathe, sleep that activity.
Mm-hmm.
So what's deemed healthy,
I know.
it's kind of up.
I'm with you on it. I feel like life needs to be enjoyed, and there is element of risk involved in everything we do.
Everything we do has
Everything.
risk.
You walk out your front door,
Yeah.
there's risk involved. Because, people do ask me quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to do this. Can I do it without getting injured?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I can't guarantee that for
No.
any activity. But I can always say, yes, these are the things required that will make your body stronger and, decrease your risk for injury. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you love it. You want to go dancing. You want to
Totally
go have fun, live life.
Yes.
life.
Yeah, and I think that's good for the people who have, it may not be necessarily something as much as running a marathon, but it's, if somebody's been, they're in the midst of going through physical therapy, and they're like, I went dancing and I was sore for 2 days afterwards, or I was hurting. I'm like, did you have fun?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. I'm like,
okay.
Did you catch on fire? Did you blow up? Like,
no.
I'm like, you're okay now? Yeah. All right. We got to get you a little stronger.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's good.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take things away from people. I want people to be able to enjoy. And this might be a little unconventional considering I'm supposed to be rehabbing people, but I think it's okay to explore a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And realize that you're not made of glass.
Right.
How
resilient
the
our
body
bodies.
is so resilient.
Strong.
And I think that's something that people need to realize more, what we should be educating.
Mm-hmm. How strong we are.
How strong we are. It's I don't advise that you go take up, mixed martial arts today, or, go into a, crash car derby or something
Right.
But, if you want to go explore something and realize that, there's a chance that you might be a little sore the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's okay to explore and realize that your body will recover from that.
Yeah.
And,
that's right.
That's part of this whole, muscle adaptation thing that we talk about. You're putting stress. You're actually causing a little bit of harm to your muscles in order to grow.
Yeah.
And so, the bones get more resilient, your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons, and they can withstand that effort. So, as long as
let's talk a little bit more specifically.
Yeah.
So, if someone is wanting to just build some muscle, what kind of routine would you recommend? I realize everyone starts differently, but if we could talk a little bit about just intensity of an exercise, the frequency, why the duration. I mean, some, really strength and conditioning kind of things, just to give people an idea. I mean, to really build muscle, that regular, I mean, you can't just do a squat every now and again.
No.
So
so obviously the programs, depending on what your goals are, whether it's actual hypertrophy or growing the muscle, whether it's strength or muscular endurance or power, all has its different volume and intensity. So the amount that we lift, the intensity that we lift, meaning how much we are lifting in relation to our 1 rep max, which is what a lot of programs are based off of. So if you're able to do a squat with 50 pounds, and you can do that one time, you would build a program around that based on that weight. So let's say we're talking about just hypertrophy or the growing of muscle. The nerdy science portion of this says that you should be training that specific muscle 2 times a week, doing about 10 to 20 sets of that particular muscle group, and doing repetitions between 6 and 12 repetitions where you're approaching failure on each set.
Wow.
Which is where most people are kind of like, so if you're able to text while doing your exercise, it's maybe not quite enough weight on there. Now, obviously, this is coming more towards trained. You may realize that just being able to do the repetition and the movement might be challenging enough. Picking up that 2-pound weight is enough for you to be able to do that. And then on top of that, it's being consistent and progressively adding more. So whether you're adding another set to that, you may not be able to do 20 sets of that particular muscle group throughout the week.
20 sets in a week?
20 sets in a week. So let's say you were to train you're going to train your arms. You're going to do your biceps.
Okay.
Over the course of the week, if you were to do 20 sets, so that means you could do, say, 3 sets of 10, and then you could do 3 exercises one day, or 4 or 5 exercises on one day and 5 on the other of different bicep sets.
Wow.
Which, yeah.
It's like just isolating the bicep.
And, there are some, if you want to get more into it, it also says, like, that can also count for, like, say, a rowing motion. So you're still using your biceps with that. So it could be single and multi-joint motions. So, accumulatively, it sounds very daunting, but if you're going to do, say you're trying to train your glutes, a squat or a deadlift would count towards that. And then you can maybe do some isolation movements or towards that glute specifically.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of sets.
Yes.
That would take a really long time.
And that's, I think that's the thing that's...
And this is for hypertrophy?
This is for hypertrophy,
This is for hypertrophy.
Yes.
Yeah, people are probably not getting that.
Probably not.
Probably not.
There's I just posted something recently on my social media, and it was like kind of the recent summary through research of how to build muscle, and a very well-known PhD in muscle hypertrophy, Brett Contreras, posted it, and it was a very beautiful summary of rest periods, volume, intensity, and it's very accumulative, and it kind of puts things in perspective, like, wow, that's quite a bit. In order to make some serious change, this is what we have to do. And I think, the standard 3 sets of 10 is not enough.
Not enough.
And, for rehab, we're trying to get reps and reps and reps, because we're just, a lot of times we're just doing body weight. So, if we're trying to get that serious change in our brain to be able to build that connection, 30 reps a day is not necessarily going to be enough. You need to do more. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Yeah. What kind of schedule do you follow? What do you do what are your goals?
Now that I've kind of done jiu-jitsu, I kind of, my schedule's a little different than it used to be. I found that I typically use the gym as a means for training for the sport that I'm currently competing in or want to play. So whether it was racing bikes or powerlifting or now jiu-jitsu, I kind of had, the activities are my workout themselves, and then I kind of use the gym as ways to train muscles that I would need for performance and also for longevity and my own personal health.
Yeah. So
right now I'm partaking in jiu-jitsu about 3 times a week, and then I do some kind of weightlifting or rehab type exercises another 3 times a week, just to kind of keep myself in shape and make sure that I don't explode and hurt myself.
No, I think that's really important to talk about, just these deep muscles that you don't see them. I mean, a lot of the muscles that we really need to work on and train are actually not visible.
Yes.
So, but the rotator cuff, the serratus anterior, the deep hip muscles. I mean, some of these muscles we just don't really think about. The transverse, the core, pelvic floor, all these muscles. I do 30-day strength training programs for women. Really, the idea is to keep it short. So it's 15 minutes a day about 5 days a week, alternating, upper body one day, lower body the next day, core the next day, basically hitting all areas. But just thinking about schedule for people. I mean, time is such a, it's tough, and what do you pick as important?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you?
So I think what's good about that, if you're talking about it from a rehab standpoint, or say you're trying to achieve a certain task, I think that if you give them an exercise that is training those deep muscles that you talk about, but it changes their movement in a way that doesn't make it painful, that's usually a good seller.
Good thing. Yeah.
So if you're like, it doesn't hurt when I do this anymore, or I'm doing that, say they perform it better, like, I can reach my arm over my head now. Like, okay, so that exercise that we just did, these are the muscles that we're training. If you get these stronger, this will be your normal way of life. Mm-hmm. And if you kind of like sell it to them and they understand like that matches up with their goal, sometimes those exercises they'll make the time.
Yeah.
They'll realize, my back hurts every time that I sit up from my chair at work because I sit too long. But if I do these things, or if I set this up a certain way, it doesn't hurt anymore. That's meaningful.
Yeah.
So, and when it comes down to time, like you said, if you give them something that's like achievable, they're more likely to do it. Mm-hmm. That 20 sets sounds very daunting. Mm-hmm. So if you can give them something like, you know what, can you spend 5 minutes of your day doing this, or in your case 15 minutes, and people are like, yeah, 15 minutes I can do this. I can give you 15 minutes. And then maybe 3 months down the line that 15 minutes turns into 30 minutes. They can do your program, and I'm going to go for a quick walk. And they're just slowly building that, and that's really how the muscle process works. You're progressively loading those muscles, taxing them to be able to handle more work.
That's good. That's great. So a couple things, just as we think about muscles, just rest and recovery. I mean, what is that? I mean, what you just described with hypertrophy, I'm not sure very many people in the population are really getting that kind of work out for each of their muscles. Because people do ask, like, what kind of rest and recovery do I need? And most of the time my thought is you need to move more. But this is an important aspect, because rest is really important, especially if you are pretty sore the next day or the
totally.
So what can that look like? Maybe give us an idea of some active rest,
Okay. So a lot of times, like, an active rest could be something, the hard thing about this topic, and even when it comes to the hypertrophy, is where is your baseline standard of movement? If you're coming from somebody who's doing nothing, that little walk to the mailbox might be a lot for you. That might be your exercise for the day. It's like, okay, well, that's what we got to work on. That's our starting point. Whereas somebody like you who's training for a marathon and you're trying to add, you're like, you know what, I just need a little bit more muscle built on me. I just want to have a little bit more to kind of keep me going for those later miles. That's different. We're having a different conversation. So the same thing goes for a recovery day. Your active recovery day is going to look a lot different than somebody who may only do 5 minutes of exercise a day. If you can get them to, squat on their couch, 5 times every hour they're watching television, something like that.
Right.
So an active recovery day, I think, is a really good opportunity to, you may not be necessarily taxing yourself. That volume and intensity is definitely down. It should not it shouldn't stress your systems a lot. In some cases, your active recovery day could be something that you really enjoy. That could be the hike with your family. That could be going for a walk with the dogs. It could be going to yoga class.
Doing something different.
Just doing something different.
But moving.
But still moving. A lot of times after those days that are really strenuous, if you do a very heavy leg day, getting on and off the chair is a very big task. So something that kind of keeps your muscles and your joints still warm, so you don't stiffen up. My active recovery days are my rehab days. Those are the days that I kind of dedicate to, like, okay, I wake up, what's sore today? What's kind of aching? What's not moving well? What's stiff? What positions were not easy to get into? And that's where I kind of tailor, like, okay, I need to address my hip mobility today, or, I'm I'm feeling like my power's not the same. Maybe I should work on some of my core, get an extra little bit in there. It's
really good. Really listening to your body,
Yeah.
kind of tuning in with
Yes.
yourself and seeing, maybe something feels a little stiff, so you work on your flexibility that day. That's really good.
And I think that takes time. If you're somebody who is training for a bigger event, you kind of know what your body needs and you can kind of flex on that. And I think for somebody who's starting up, I think maybe you should dedicate a day to that, whether it's, 2 days on, 1 day off to recover, and you kind of set up I'm going to walk in the pool today, or I'm going to do some kind of stretching to help, recover.
Yeah.
So whatever that may be.
It's really good.
I think it's good to maybe consult somebody on that. If you don't know where to start, I think it's really good, important to, people who are listening to this obviously know that you're a great source of information, and, consult somebody who kind of knows how to help you. You can, due to our ability to, we have unrestricted, access as a patient for physical therapy. That model allows somebody to come in like, hey, I just need to be able to do this activity. Can I come in for an evaluation? Can you look at how I do this and maybe give me some exercises that I can do to kind of get me on that path?
Yeah. It's really helpful. I mean, I think, as a physical therapist, we get to ask questions. So I think sometimes people feel stuck and they don't know what to do, where to go, how to help. But the nice thing about therapy is, as physical therapists, we just ask you. We just ask you, what hurts, what
do you need?
What do you need? What do you want? I mean, how literally we're a guide. We're guiding someone's bodies, ideally to become stronger, to be more functional, to feel like they can move better.
And we have a really awesome opportunity to spend a lot of time with them. Sometimes that's not always the case, we get a pretty solid amount of time to get a lot of information to help them.
Yeah.
So we end up being like the hair salon or the barber, they tend to, the patients tend to open up. They feel comfortable talking with us with what they need. And
yeah, that's great. Yeah. Thank you. Well, as we think about closing, I would like to know, what are 3 daily practices, healthy practices that make you feel well?
I try to do something every day, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour and a half. I just try to stay moving some way or another. That's probably the biggest thing. Next biggest thing, I need something to turn my brain off. Whether it's listening to like a Headspace meditation app, or just reading a book that's brainless, or just consuming something that's different and being able to laugh, just something that kind of gets you out of your normal routine. And spending time with people you love, I think is one of the biggest things, because it kind of helps you settle in and recharge. And I think that's super important. When you're setting these goals, a lot of times family or somebody you care about is that big motivating factor. So I think that's definitely something that I strive to do, is spend more time with family, and that's kind of like my reset.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on this podcast. You have a very active Instagram account.
Oh, thank you.
Would you like to tell people how to connect with you?
Yes. So most of my stuff is on Instagram. I do have some content on YouTube as well, and Twitter and Facebook. But easiest way to find me is on my website. It is Smith Forged SC, and you can find that in the notes below, and we'll connect all the social medias on there. But the website kind of directs you to how to get in contact with me, via email, and all of my social media links are on there. But if you want to look for things as far as exercise, my Instagram is probably the most active.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Balanced by Beth is a podcast to inspire women to live strong. The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be used as personal medical advice.